So the next one, I'm not entirely sure whether it's related to my autism or the fact that I lived in a dysfunctional family, dysfunctional household. I had an unusual relationship with pain and injury. So what I mean by that is I would fake injuries a lot. I've tried to remember why, and it's not clear. I think it all comes from the fact that I realized that whenever a kid was injured, had a cast somewhere, they would get attention. And there was this kid in school who I think might well have been autistic because he would have like meltdown episodes. There was one time where in primary school he broke his elbow, and so he had a massive cast on. And suddenly, this little weird kid that nobody liked was super popular, and everyone was like drawing things on his cast and stuff. I thought it was gonna be a way for me to fit in without necessarily understanding the social dynamics or anything like that. So I thought, oh, it's easy. I just have to break something and then everyone will be interested in me and I'll be popular. And I would kind of fantasize about that. I wasn't, and thankfully, I wasn't capable of like actually doing harm to myself. And so I would pretend. I realized that it would get me attention. Like, again, that's me looking at it with perspective and hindsight as a 27-year-old. At the time, it wasn't as clear to me. But that's what I think that's why I did it, was I realized that it would get me a lot of attention, even like from my own parents or from health professionals or whatever, because a lot of the time I felt like I was invisible. At home, at school, I didn't really have friends. At home I was kind of left to my own devices as well, pretty neglected emotionally and stuff like that. So I thought, and my mom being a very grandiose narcissist took a lot of room. So there was no room left for me to grow up in. And so I thought, at least if I injure myself, people have to pay attention to me. They have to take me to the doctor, to the hospital. They have to look after me. They have to, and then in school I'll be popular. And so there was this phase of a few months, maybe more, in primary school where I would constantly pretend that I was injured, and I wouldn't completely like invent it from scratch. I think most of the time it would start off as an actual very minor injury. As a kid, my body was very tough, and I would never get, even though I was a bit of a tomboy, and playing rough and doing all kinds of things, I wouldn't break any bones or anything like that. And I was so mad at it because I thought, I wish I could break some bones like naturally and like, but instead I had to fake it. So I would use like a natural, a minor injury and turn it into something bigger. It's kind of a sensitive topic for me because I feel a lot of shame around it, but also now I'm able to look back and transform that shame into compassion towards myself. And it wasn't like I was hurting anybody by doing that. Like, I wasn't doing anything bad. I was just looking for attention. Honestly, that's what it was. And it makes me feel bad for little me being undiagnosed autistic, growing up in a dysfunctional family, abusive household. I knew I wasn't okay, and I didn't know how to ask for help, and that was my way of asking for help. I honestly feel now more compassion towards that little kid than anything else. But obviously it takes a lot to admit that kind of thing and share it on the internet because it's very like vulnerable. And then the only time I actually broke a bone, I was out of that phase by that time, and I was playing with a friend and like I tripped and my foot kicked the bottom of a wardrobe that I had in my room, and it was a pretty sharp edge, and it actually broke my big toe. and that's the only bone I've ever broken in my entire life. And like it was the other way around, like all the other times I didn't have any broken bones, I would, you know, make all this fuss about it. And this one time where I actually had a broken bone, I didn't tell anyone. It would hurt, but I would ignore it, or I would tell people, but they didn't take it seriously. So I would, you know, whenever I would do horseback riding with my dad, I had this very specific equipment that I mentioned in my first video, and one of those were like specific boots I had to wear, and they were pretty tight around my toes. And so I would tell my dad, I can't wear those shoes, it hurts too much, my toe hurts, and he would like be very dismissive about it. And then I would go to the school nurse multiple times and show her my injury and be like, it hurts and stuff. But she ended up going to my mom, who was a teacher at that school. And then instead of my mom being worried about me, she had a bit of a narcissistic rage moment where we came home and she was like, do you realize how humiliating it was for me to have the school nurse come to me and say that, you know, you needed help with your toe? Like, that, how does that make me look as a parent? And like, it looks like I'm neglecting you or whatever. Like, she didn't care about how I was doing, she only cared about her image. But yeah, so I think it's quite ironic that the only time I actually had a broken bone, I kept it to myself for like a month, or like, I didn't completely keep it to myself, but I didn't make a big deal out of it. I ended up going to the GP after a month, and he was like, you know, if you'd come earlier, we would probably have done surgery to put a little bit of like a little metal rod or something to attach it to the bone, because basically there was a bit of bone that broke and like got separated from the rest, and so they said they probably would have done surgery. So I was glad that I didn't go earlier, because I didn't want to do surgery. And for a while I couldn't bend my toe because of that. The doctor said like, you'll probably never be able to bend your toe again, and that was bullcrap because I can. But overall I think it worked out in my favor, because I didn't have to go through surgery, and my toe ended up going back to normal. So okay, the next point is I had weird postures or gait or whatever positions, which is another common autistic trait. So for example, my back is very arched, and even already as a kid. I remember one time we had to do an exercise in physical education PE class where we had to sit against the wall. I don't remember why, but like, it's kind of odd. We had to sit against the wall, and like, we had to touch the wall with the whole length of our back or something like that. And there was such a gap between, even when I was trying my hardest, there was such a gap between the arch in my back and the wall, that I definitely, like, I had the most arched back in the entire class. So I had a pretty odd posture in that sense. And like, with age, like, of course my posture got worse, and so now it's kind of like rounded shoulders and a very arched back. So yeah. But there was that, and also like walking on my toes. So I walked on my toes a lot as a kid, but I feel like it wasn't for sensory reasons, which is the case for a lot of people. It was just because I liked the way it felt, and it helped me get into the spirit of an animal. Because horses, for example, they walk on their toes. Basically, their hoofs is like their big toe, and all the other toes disappeared over time. And so it's kind of like they're walking on their big toe. And so to me, like, walking on my toes, it was kind of like walking like a horse, you know? So I would walk on my toes again a lot, and also like always get into the weirdest contortions. And I would never sit, I didn't like sitting at the table, I was always sitting on the floor, on the sofa, or getting into the weirdest positions. And people would say it was really odd, you know, and it didn't look like I was very comfortable, but to me that was the most comfortable way of sitting. The next point is I had a weak sense of gender. I never identified, as a girl or now as a woman. Most little girls grow up idolizing, Disney princesses and dreaming of a big wedding with a big white dress and stuff like that, and I never had that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just one big social construct, but it's just I never cared about that, and I played with girl toys as much as boy toys, and I didn't see myself as a gender. I saw myself as a being, a person, most of the time an animal, but gender was just never important to me as a child, and still isn't, which seems to be a very common experience for autistic people. And all the movies I watched, all the stories I consumed, I identified with any character, whether it was a girl, a boy, an animal, like it didn't matter. And even in my dreams, I wouldn't be very much gendered. Sometimes I would even be like the opposite gender or just have no gender. And so I didn't strongly identify with gender, if that makes sense. And I wasn't into any of the things that the girls my age were into. So yeah, I was very much doing my own thing, and like gender wasn't part of my identity. It was just like it wasn't part of my identity. It didn't matter to me. Another way that I played in an unusual way was that I liked to, with family members, I liked to find hiding places, the most unusual hiding places, like underneath pieces of furniture, or like we had this big sofa for most of my childhood. I don't remember what it was made of. It was a strange fabric. So like it was covered in I guess it was a couch cover, right? And so there would be a huge flap of fabric at the back with like a big zipper. I would, and my dog, my childhood dog, my best friend, would sleep underneath a piece of furniture right next to the back of the sofa. And so I would crawl behind the sofa and hide between the sofa and the flap of fabric, the cover, the back of the couch cover, I don't know. And I would hide there and pretend like I wasn't there, and like I loved to hide and observe people, spy on people. I think it's because I always felt like an outsider. I always felt like I didn't fit in. I was uncomfortable. So I liked to observe people without them knowing that I was there, like not being perceived, Looking back, like I definitely think there was an unhealthy element to it. Of like, like you shouldn't spy on people. But at the time, I didn't think of it as anything, like it wasn't ill intention or anything like that. And also like I loved to like hide and make weird noises and watch people be like, where's that noise coming from? And like I would follow people, and I would imagine that I had like superpowers and I was really good at following people without them noticing, having a lot of fun like that. So that was definitely an unusual way to play with people. I wasn't like directly interacting with them. So like I said, I wasn't interested in any trends or anything like that. I definitely didn't have the same interests as my peers. And I couldn't understand the whole point of social media. So as a kid, MSN was the most common social media, and then it was Facebook. Facebook was huge, especially as a teenager, and that was before Instagram, TikTok, and all that. Facebook and YouTube were big. I loved YouTube, but I couldn't understand the point of Facebook. I was like, I have to be around these people I'm not interested in all day, who ostracize me, who I have nothing in common with, and then you expect me to go home and continue interacting with them on the internet and share my life so that they can bully me further. Like I was like horrified by the whole idea of Facebook, and I was like, I don't understand how everyone is addicted to it and everyone seems to get it, and I don't. And I still don't really like most social media. Like I love YouTube, obviously, but I don't really post on anything else. Like, I post a little bit on Instagram, but it's not really like I don't share my like everyday life. I post about autism, I post about my art and stuff, but like yeah, I just don't get it. And I didn't get it as a child. In school, I very much hated any type of group project, group assignment, and I would always try to find ways out of them, or like hope that the other people in my group didn't want to do any of the work so that I could do it all on my own, because I was very much a loner. I very much liked to do things on my own. I didn't like working with other people. I wanted to be left alone and do my own thing. And so I remember, like, even as late as high school, I remember begging my teachers to let me do the work on my own and not have to. And they would be like, you have to learn to work with other people. And I was like, if I still don't like it in high school, I'm not gonna like it ever. You know what I mean? Also, like, oral exams, like, when I had to speak in front of a whole class was like such a nightmare to me. I would get so fucking anxious. I would feel nauseous. I would feel my heart beating out of my chest. I would lose my voice. I would be shaking. And like everyone looked at me with confusion and almost concern, I think, sometimes, because I just had such, like, everyone says like, oh, I'm a bit nervous before my test, but for me it was like, I don't know, the physical manifestations of stress for me were like out of this world. And it was so embarrassing because I would be standing there in front of a class holding a piece of paper, and the piece of paper would be like, and like I couldn't control anything, and my voice would tremble, like the whole thing. It was absolutely horrendous. And even like whenever I was just asked to answer a question in class, having to speak up for everyone to hear. Like, I basically always tried to blend into the background. I wanted everyone to forget about me because I didn't want to be perceived. I didn't want, and so whenever I was asked to speak up, all the attention was on me, and I hated that so much, and I would get so freaking anxious, at the beginning of a year when everyone is asked to present themselves and tell their name and stuff like that. Like the anxiety I felt when I had to do that, like I really felt like I was gonna be sick. It was horrible. And obviously I could tell that most other people were fine. They weren't as stressed as I was. Also, like, I kind of mentioned that before, but I had absolutely no sense of style. And because I didn't have a strong sense of gender either, I would kind of try and do my own thing, but it, like, from society standards, it was not good. So, for example, in primary school, because I would hang out with the boys more, I think I identified with the boys more, and so I thought, oh, then I should wear like football t-shirt. I was never into football, but I had a phase where I was like, I'm gonna start wearing football shirts and wear gel in my hair. And like, I guess I didn't understand that like hair gel was mostly for boys, because at the time, the trend for boys was to do like spiky hair or like go like this with their hair, with hair gel and stuff. And so I begged my mother to buy me some hair gel, and I would like put hair gel in but my hair was down to my butt on my lower back, so obviously I couldn't do what the boys did. So I put hair gel like on my fringe and whatever else. It was horrible, but I didn't care how I looked. I just liked I would get bullied for that because I must have looked so strange. I had absolutely no sense of style or aesthetics or anything like that. It was terrible. I would put things together that didn't go together, and I would get mocked a lot. I would be told that I looked like a peasant because I didn't wear any brands or any trendy clothes. And I just didn't get it. I didn't understand. In secondary school, I kind of, started to realize that everyone was like, all the girls were starting to get into relationships and stuff. And so I started asking, and I wasn't popular at all. Like, at all. I was probably the least popular person in my class, if not in my school, you know? But I started asking every boy in my class to be my boyfriend. And not only did I get rejected every single time, I was also like getting tricked. So people started to, I guess because I took things literally and I didn't get social cues and stuff, people would trick me into thinking that this boy wants to be your boyfriend. And I would believe them and they would make fun of me. Obviously that boy wasn't interested in me at all, but I actually believed it, you know. Also, like, the other kids didn't want to be associated with me because it would look bad for their popularity, their reputation. Even like my best friend at the time at one point was like, I don't want to be friends with you anymore because it's keeping me from fitting in with this big group of people, the group of popular kids. And I was like, I mean, if you would rather hang out with those fake people than me as your loyal best friend, then please go ahead. But like, I think you'll be back. Like, I could tell that these people weren't loyal, they weren't actual friends, you know, they were just socializing for the sake of socializing. And fair enough, she came back to me after a while, but like, very much like the idea of being friends with me made people so unpopular that they had to unfriend me to have a chance to, and like, actually speak crap about me, so that to send the signal that no, I don't associate with that horrible person, that weirdo, so I'm safe, you know. Like, that's how bad it was. I also had a very odd sense of humor as a kid. I remember in primary school making a joke that I had made up on my own. I was so proud of it, and looking back, it didn't make any freaking sense. No wonder that no one got it. And I thought like, people don't get it, it's so funny. But like, it actually made no sense. So yeah, I would have a really weird sense of humor in that sense, and like, whenever I tried making jokes, they didn't work. I would also overshare or say inappropriate things without realizing it as a kid. For example, when someone would be like sharing their sibling's name, for example, I would be like, oh, I know a dog named like that. And to me, it was very much like factual. Like, I didn't mean anything by it. But like, every time people were like, oh, you're so rude, like, you don't say things like that, it's so rude and disrespectful. I'm like, why? Because it's a dog? Like, dogs are less important than people? I couldn't understand why people might find it rude to say that someone's name was also the name of a dog I knew, because in neurotypical terms, that meant that I was insulting that person by comparing them to a dog. But in my eyes, dogs weren't inferior to people, and so I didn't understand why it was offensive. Things like that. Or I remember, like, again, primary school, secondary school, sharing how much my parents paid for our cat. My parents were always, you know, pretending to be poor and like convincing me that they were poor and stuff, but like, they got a Maine Coon kitten that they bought for like €1,000. To me, like, again, it was just a fact. I was just sharing how much my parents paid for the cat, like 1,200 euros, I remember. And then my parents would be like so angry at me, like, you don't go sharing information like that. Like, you know, I couldn't tell that it was the kind of information you're not supposed to tell. Also, like, I was always the last one to leave the classroom. I was really slow putting my stuff away. And so obviously, like, it must have looked like I was a teacher's pet. No matter how hard I tried, I was like, this time I'm gonna leave class at the same time as everybody. And no, it would always fail. Like, even if I took only the minimum out of my bag, I don't know if I have dyspraxia or something. I definitely have like dyspraxic traits, but I would be always so slow to put my stuff away. Same things for eating. I would take ages to eat, and like, most people would eat in 15 minutes, and I would take so long to finish my food. Like, I took a really long time. I had to take a break because I feel like I've been filming for like 2 hours straight. This video is taking forever to film. and it's 1 p.m. and I was like, I gotta start making lunch at some point. So while lunch is cooking, I'm gonna keep going for a little bit. I feel like this video is all over the place, but that's how we do things over here. So the next point is I was very physically tense, and that ties into all the other points I made in these two videos about like my stress levels, my anxiety levels as a kid, as an undiagnosed autistic kid. Another sign of that was that I was very physically tense, and I wouldn't have known how physically tense I was if I didn't have a specific memory in secondary school where in gym class, at the end of gym class one day, we did a sort of meditation thingy, relaxation. We were all asked to lie down on the floor of the gymnasium, whatever, relax our body, and they maybe even did like a body scan, relaxation body scan, where you like visualize every part of your body, relaxing your muscles and stuff. So they did that, and I felt pretty relaxed. I was like, this is as relaxed as I get. And then the teacher was like, if we tap on your shoulder, it means you look relaxed enough that you can go change and like leave class, which is a little weird to me, of like, you're not allowed to leave until you look relaxed enough, like as if you had any kind of control over how relaxed you look, especially in my case. I saw the teacher go around and tap everyone's shoulder. There were only a few people left, and I was like, okay, now the teacher's obviously like picking on me, because ain't no way I'm one of the least relaxed people here. I feel so freaking relaxed. And after a while, the teacher came up to me and was like, you look really, really tense. And I was so shocked. And I was one of the last to be allowed to go. And that really blew my mind. I was like, how can there be such a gap between what I think I look like and what is actually the case? And like, that basically sums up my whole life, is this disconnect between my inside world and the outside world. And like, I think I project or I convey something, and actually it's a completely different thing, and I get misunderstood all the time, and so that was pretty telling. Also, I wouldn't always understand when people were being sarcastic. I would take things literally, and so, for example, when people said like, I don't know if I can give an example, but like people were obviously joking, or even like adults would be obviously joking, and I would take things literally. Like, they would ask me a question and I would start to answer it honestly, or like ask me to do something and I would start doing it, and then it would be like, no, I was joking. I would be like, I felt so dumb for not getting it, and that still happens. I'm a bit better at it now, but it still happens, and it's every time it's so embarrassing. I would also always speak out against injustice, and I couldn't back down from an argument. In my head, there was no like, it's inappropriate to argue with an adult. Like, if an adult said something that I didn't agree with, or I was witnessing some kind of injustice, I had to say something about it. And then I would be like portrayed as this rude kid that hadn't been well educated by her parents, To me, I wasn't being rude or disrespectful. I was like, how can I let this go? It was not possible for me to let go once I saw an injustice or I heard someone say something wrong. So, for example, I would correct teachers a lot. And I was like, I must have sent a lot of mixed messages to people, because I was the shy kid who never spoke up in class, except when it was about a subject I was passionate about, or whenever a teacher made a mistake that I felt like I had to correct. And so, of course, that was always misinterpreted as a lack of respect, or me being a know-it-all, a smartass, trying to be pretentious and arrogant, especially as I was I was a teacher's daughter, so I was always portrayed as this like intellectual being who was arrogant and stuff. But like, I don't know, to me it's not possible to hear a teacher say something wrong about something and then just let it go. I have to say something, and in those moments I'm not shy at all. Like my whole life I've been like that. Like I remember so many times my partner telling me like, I can't believe you said that. I can't believe you spoke out like that. You spoke up like that, because usually you would be so shy. And I'm like, when there's injustice involved or just incorrect information, I'm not shy anymore. I don't care what people think, you know. So in secondary school, I had a special interest in Roman Polanski's movies, which it cannot get more unusual than that for a 14-year-old to have an interest in such an obscure niche part of the film industry. My school had taken me to see what is it called again? Vampire Killers. I'll put the title on the screen, but like that was my first introduction to a Polanski film, and I was hooked by that movie. And then I started going on the internet, watching all his movies and stuff. And so I knew everything about his life as a 14-year-old, which is weird. Usually as a 14-year-old, you know everything about your favorite band, but I knew everything about an obscure filmmaker from the 70s who also happens to be a freaking criminal. I was obsessed with his films. Obviously, like, it's not the case anymore, just, you know, but as a preteen, that was what I was obsessed with. I've had obsessions like that on filmmakers and actors and stuff. And I knew everything about his life. I knew everything about, you know, Charles Manson and, like, how his wife was killed and stuff. And so one day in art class, so I must have been 14, my art teacher said something about, I don't remember what it was, but she basically gave a date about the time a film was made or something. And I put my hand in the air and I said, that can't be, because Sharon Tate died in that year and blah blah blah. And everyone looked at me like I was the weirdest, most crazy creature they'd ever seen. And I get it, I understand. Like, imagine, like, you're in class, there's this weird kid that never speaks up in class, and then suddenly the teacher just gives a random obscure reference to some very specific art piece, and then this weird kid says like, you're wrong, it couldn't be that year, it must have been this year because of when this person that nobody knows about died. And like, and I gave such specific details about it and stuff, and now I look back and I'm like, how could I possibly not have been diagnosed earlier? Like, how? How? Like, everything about me, from the way I looked, the way I behaved, the things I talked about, was so freaking obviously autistic. How did they miss it? I don't get it. So yeah, I would, or like if a teacher made a mistake, like in their language, like, because like I said, French is a very complicated language, and so even French people don't speak proper French or correct French most of the time. So a lot of my teachers would make spelling mistakes, or they would make, you know, grammar mistakes or whatever. And I would always be correcting them. And of course that comes off as very arrogant. But in my perfectionistic mind, I can't let it go, you know? I have to make sure everything is correct, everything is right. I also hated having my hair blown. I always struggled with heat, and to me the hair blower, was it called? It was always too hot, even on the lowest setting, and I felt like I was burning, like it felt like it was burning my skin, you know? And I hated it. And also I hated it because my hair was so long and thick. It took such a long time to dry it, and so I would blow dry it for what felt like hours, sitting, not moving and stuff. And I was like, I have better things to do. I hated it so much. And also, more generally, like, hated going to the hairdresser for so many reasons. But one of the main ones was like when they're washing your hair and like the water trickles down your neck and into your ears and stuff. It's the worst feeling in the freaking world. Tell me in the comments if you agree. So this is after lunch that same day. I just had lunch, and now I'm gonna finish recording this video. It feels absurdly long. The next one is related to phones, and so whenever I was on the phone, so that's kind of a stim. Whenever I was on the phone, I would pace like crazy. I guess it helped me regulate my stress, my emotions. In the first part of this video, I mentioned how like I was painfully shy. Well, that also applied to phone calls. I've always hated phone calls. As a kid, whenever I had to make a phone call, like it was horrible. And my parents would force me to do it. They would be like, you need to get used to it, and I always hated it. It stressed me out so much. To this day, like when I have to make a phone call, it takes so much out of me. And so whenever I was on the phone, even if it was like a phone call with someone that I liked, someone I wasn't too nervous about around, like a friend, I would always be pacing like crazy and I didn't even realize it. The reason why I know that I did it so much is because people would make fun of me or like pointed out to me how much I paced, and it would make them laugh, like family members. So yeah, I paced a lot. And also when it comes to phones, I didn't have a cell phone, I didn't have a smartphone. It was that time when you still had to know phone numbers by heart, and so I knew the phone numbers of everyone in my life by heart. And I would recite them. I have very vivid memories of being in the car with my great aunt and like being like, do you want to know all the phone numbers I know by heart? And then I would recite them. And I took a lot of pride in the fact that I knew many phone numbers by heart. So yeah, that's that. Also, like that ties into kind of something similar I said earlier and like my empathy and stuff, but I couldn't stand the idea of any creature being suffering or being killed, big or small. And so I would always be the kid who saved every little creature around. Like I would always be saving, snails, ants, and spiders and things like that. By the way, I found out on an Autistic subreddit not so long ago that if you want to move snails from the road, you should lightly tap on their shell before picking them up because their body grips the floor and so it can hurt them to just pick them up like that. So lightly tap them on the shell before picking them up. That's a good trick I learned. And so I would always be the one to like save creatures, insects, small animals. And I thought everyone was so cruel and insensitive because other people around me would like kill insects, kill mice, and I thought like, why so much cruelty? Like why do humans have to destroy everything that they don't like or that they find inconvenient, as if those creatures weren't deserving of life and as if like they couldn't feel anything. Like I just couldn't understand, and the adults in my life would be like, oh, you'll grow out of it, that's a kid thing. But I never grew out of it, and still to this day as an adult I'm always saving every little creature around me. A few years ago when my partner and I were traveling across Europe, there was this one time when we were in Italy where it must have rained. It was in the summer. It must have rained that day or something. And we were on this big road. Thankfully, it wasn't a very busy road, as in like there was maybe 2 cars an hour. The road was covered in snails. And when I say covered, I mean there were thousands of snails probably. That was like my worst nightmare because I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to save every single one of these snails. And I'm not kidding. I must have spent 2 hours on that road with my partner trying to save as many snails as possible. Every time it's nighttime, the ground is wet or something, I'm like telling everyone around me, like, look at your feet, you know, make sure you don't step on any snails. And whenever it happens, either someone else steps on a snail, I step on a snail, which is even worse. I feel such crushing guilt. It's horrible. Or like if I see an insect or an animal in pain or dying, like it, like, I don't know, it's just horrible. It makes me feel so bad, especially when I can't do anything about it. I was already like that as a child, and everyone was like, you'll grow out of it. And now I'm like, no, I didn't, because I'm autistic. Another childhood autistic trait of mine is that I loved making lists. I loved, especially when I had a computer, my dad's old laptop that he gave me. I think I was pretty young. I must have been around 12 or something, 10, 12. And I didn't have access to the internet because my parents didn't want me to. So I was just basically using that laptop to write documents, basically. And so that's when I started making lists. And I kept doing that as I got older. I loved to make lists of the things I liked. So making lists of my favorite movies. I liked making lists of, I don't know, sometimes it was pretty specific stuff, like a list of my favorite classical composers, or a list of the things I'd like to achieve in life, a list of, if I were to make a movie one day, all the things I'd like to include in it, like inspirations from other movies, filmmakers, you know, or like at one point I wanted to make a documentary on fantasy through the ages, and so I started compiling information about every fantasy story that was ever written in the history of humanity and stuff like that. And I guess, you know, it's clearly the kind of thing that autism diagnostic criteria refer to when they say, like, I like collecting information about categories of things. But when I first read that, I didn't think about the lists I made about, you know, my favorite fantasy movies or whatever. It's the kind of thing where sometimes the diagnostic criteria can be a bit misleading. Again, because it was very much written around young white boys, and so it doesn't doesn't necessarily take into consideration the fact that special interests can be anything. The next one is kind of sad. I mean, it makes me sad when I think about it. But a lot of adults, when I was a kid, would say that there was something wrong with me. They would say, like, that it wasn't normal how I was always in my own world. It wasn't normal how shy I was. And that was, like, the people in my life. But there were also, like, complete strangers who would say things that were honestly very harsh, insulting, and ableist, to be honest. That cut pretty deep, you know. I remember this one time when I was 9 that my mom and I went to Paris because I have cousins in Paris, and so we visited my cousins for the first time. I think it was at the entrance of the Natural History Museum, and I don't remember what happened. It was like the security gate or something. Maybe I didn't. He told me something and I didn't respond. And he said something so offensive, it stuck with me to this day. He said, like, in French, obviously, he was like, is there something wrong with that kid? Is she dumb or something? Yeah, that hurt a lot. And the worst part is, I think my mom didn't even defend me or protect me. She, like, because obviously for narcissists, it's all about how they look. So anytime my mom felt humiliated because of me, like, it was my fault, obviously. And on the other hand, whenever I did something that was considered as outstanding, or like, then she would collect the credit and be proud to be my mom because, you know, she could get some secondhand praise or something. So it was all about how I made her look, basically. It was never about how I felt or anything like that. I'm pretty sure she didn't, like, she should have, in that moment, she should have told that man that it wasn't right for him to say something like that, and it was highly offensive, and like, how dare you speak to my daughter like this. But I think my mom must have like smiled politely, and afterwards she said something like that I made her look bad, or like, why can't I behave normally, or something like that, you know? So yeah, a lot of adults, either the adults that were close to me or complete strangers, like, they could tell that I was different, and of course they didn't express it in a very nice way, which of course contributes to, when you hear that as a kid, is obviously going to contribute to you feeling broken and like a failure and like an alien, you know. The last point I wanted to talk about, thank God I'm reaching the end because I'm starting to get really tired, is I wrote down Peter Pan syndrome. And what I mean by that is that I was strangely aware as a kid that one day I was gonna grow up, and I was really scared of becoming like the adults around me. I was really scared of becoming serious like them, of becoming boring like them, of losing the things that made me excited, the things that gave me joy. I was scared that I was gonna stop having such a vivid imagination, but I didn't really. It's almost like I made this wish, and this wish was granted, where I never really grew up. That's how I feel, at least. I feel like I'm still somewhat stuck in childhood, and for a long time I saw it as a problem. I saw it as something negative, something to be fixed, before I knew I was autistic. You know, I thought like, I'm not a proper adult, blah, blah, blah. I had a lot of shame around that, for still liking the things I liked as a kid. From the perspective of society, I'm very childish in many ways, and I felt a lot of shame around that as an adult. And now I know I'm autistic, I'm like, actually, to me at least, it's part of my autistic experience, and I know there's nothing wrong with that, and I don't want to change that. And I'm very happy that actually the wish I had as a kid to like remain a kid kind of worked, because I see so many adults who are like, oh yeah, I used to like that as a kid, but not anymore. And I think it's so sad that they've become so serious, and that they all look like perfect little, you know, what society expects them to be like as adults, and they're all the same, and they all like the same things, and there's nothing fun about them. And like, you know, I always thought like, if I have children one day, I'm not gonna be like those parents who like almost like forgot what it was like to be a child, and have no patience for their children's quirkiness, you know, because like they're above that, they're too serious for that. Like, I'll never be that kind of parent, you know. And so I feel like in a way I had that Peter Pan syndrome, because it's almost like I never really grew up. I still like the things I liked as a kid, even though it's not considered appropriate anymore. In many ways, I'm still very much like my child self. And I think it goes back to that synaptic pruning that I talked at the beginning, where, you know, autistic people, it doesn't happen the same way as it does in neurotypicals. And so that's why we still love a lot of the things we loved as kids most of the time, or things like that. A lot of the synapses that we had as kids stick with us way into adulthood, where in neurotypicals they're pruned, so they lose most of these things that we get to hold on to. And I'm very grateful for that. Like I said, it was almost like my wish was granted, and I did not turn into that boring, serious adult that I didn't want to be. That doesn't mean, though, that we should be infantilized. I feel like a lot of the time society looks at us and sees that we appear a little childish sometimes because of the things we like, or the way we dress, or the way we communicate, and then society's like, so that means these people can't think for themselves and can't make decisions for themselves, and we need to make those decisions for them. And that's when we get infantilized, which is wrong. We're still able to, I mean, I'm still a responsible adult. I'm still able to make decisions for myself. Enjoying childish things is not the same thing as being a child. Just because some of us like childish things doesn't mean we should be infantilized. So that's just a distinction that's important to make, in my opinion. I'm gonna end this video here because I'm tired. I'm still in burnout, and in the afternoon is kind of when I get like a big wave of tiredness. So I'm gonna go rest. Thanks for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. I have a Ko-fi account page in case you'd like to support my channel monetarily. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!